Welcome, everyone. The town of Shrewsbury Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee presents Coming to the Table Forum, cultivating a supportive community for diverse student affinity groups and how to foster togetherness amongst differing views. I am Robbin Miller. I am the moderator tonight. And I would like to thank you all for coming today. Before we begin, we would like to invite 3 members of the DEIB committee to share opening remarks and some housekeeping items with you. Please welcome the committee chair, Cynthia Mesquita, Adiola Mbami, and Bindu Gupta.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. So we are part of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee for the town of Shrewsbury, and we're very excited that you're here tonight. We hope that you will leave with some strategies for how to handle difficult conversations when they come up. I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about what the charge for our committee is, and that is to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and civic engagement by facilitating discussions, organizing events, and then recommending strategies to access resources within the community. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Adiola to talk a little bit more about what will be happening tonight. But before I do that, I would like to give her a little shout out for doing a lot of the legwork and a lot of the behind the scenes detail for putting this forum together tonight. So.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Bindu. We've all worked really hard, so we're just so grateful that it's finally here, and I know there's going to be some good discussion today. Just to go over some housekeeping items, after our panelists do their talk, we will have a question and answer session. So the way we'll do that is I have note cards and pens, so we're only going to accept questions that are written down and collected. So as the panelists are discussing, we want you to think about any questions you have. It's pretty informal. It's a nice small group here. So anything that you think is going to serve you, your community, maybe the young people in your lives, just as you're listening, just think about some questions you can jot down and find one of us, raise your hand, and we'll collect it. And at the question and answer session, read it, and hopefully our panelists will have enough time to answer all your questions. So thank you very much, and without further ado, let's get started. So we'll have Robbin come and introduce our panelists.
Okay, I will now introduce our panelists for the evening. First, we will welcome Ridha Alam. Ridha Alam is a junior biology major, philosophy minor at UMass Amherst. She is hoping to pursue an MD, PhD in clinical reproductive research. Ridha restarted the Shrewsbury branch of Students Together Opposing Prejudice this year, which used to run in 2015. The Students Together Opposing Prejudice, parentheses, stop, capital S, capital T, capital O, capital P, close parentheses, program is a comprehensive initiative designed to foster inclusivity and combat prejudice among middle school students. Implemented over a 7-week period, this curriculum is facilitated by high school students who have undergone leadership training. The program employs an array of engaging games, activities, and peer discussions to instill in participants the ability to identify, challenge, and effectively respond to stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. By nurturing a well-rounded understanding of diverse perspectives, staff empowers young individuals to forge meaningful connections with those who differ from them. The program aims to develop participants into future leaders and model citizens. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you.
Now we welcome Efraim. Efraim Yudewitz serves as the director of the Crane Lake Camp in West Stockbridge, Massachusetts. CLC is an immersive, with an I, overnight camp for Jewish kids to build resiliency, develop lifelong friendships, connect to their Jewish identity, and affirm their identity. Ephraim came to CLC after having served the Northeast Jewish community for 15 years. Most recently, Ephraim spent 7 years as the director of Camp Tel Noir, did I say that? In New Hampshire, and previously held leadership positions at Gan Academy, Greater Boston's independent Jewish high school. Ephraim,
It's not going to offend me.
Ephraim is a big believer in the transformative impact of Jewish camp and other positive, inclusive youth communities. Camp has played a very special role in his life. He's been a camper, staff member, consultant, board member, and director. Ephraim, his wife, who he met when they were both campers, and their 2 kids live in Sharon, Massachusetts, where their home is filled with tie-dye, spontaneous dance parties, and snacks, and always has room for camp friends and extended family. Welcome, Ephraim. We will now take the time to have our panelists give us a further introduction of themselves and their relevant work.
Do you want to go first?
Whatever you want.
Okay. So that was a really great introduction. Thank you, Robbin. But just to repeat what she kind of said, my name is Ridha Alam. I am a junior at UMass Amherst. I'm studying biology and minoring in philosophy. I'm a member of the Commonwealth Honors College at UMass, and I've been a resident of Shrewsbury since birth. I'm here today to represent the program that I'm coordinating called STOP, which is Students Together Opposing Prejudice. And with this program, we basically focus on middle school students and teaching them how to respond and react to racism and stereotypes. They have group discussions with high school students, and they get to really collaborate and meet each other, make meaningful connections. And I'm just kind of on the back burner overseeing what's going on. And it's just been a really great opportunity for me, and I'm glad that it's gotten me connected with such awesome people. But yeah, that's my little introduction. Passing on to you.
All right. Again, thank you so much for having me here. This is really exciting. I was telling my kids this morning that I was doing this, and they said, isn't that for experts? And I said, yeah, usually, but they got me. But I don't know that I'm an expert, but I'm certainly very, very passionate about this topic, both about understanding different perspectives, coming together, celebrating our differences, understanding our values and what's important to us, and in particular, how we do that and support our youth. That is really, really exciting. And I just want to say thank you. This has already been really, really fun for me to get a chance to meet you and all of you. So thank you for having me. Just very briefly, a little bit about myself. I tell people I'm from Boston, the greater Boston area. I lived in Marblehead, which is on the North Shore. I lived there when I was little, and my family moved from Marblehead all the way to Miami, which I still hold I still hold a grudge for doing that, primarily because the community, which was lovely, lovely people, but it didn't have the environment to support the cultural and religious norms that my family wanted and was seeking at the time. And so we moved to an environment that was more conducive for that. And that's always stayed with me, is thinking about how do we help build the communities that we want so that the widest range and the most diverse community can be together and get what they all need. So I moved to Florida, I went to camp, and I went to overnight camp, and thank you for that intro. I've had the privilege of being the director of an overnight camp for the last 10 years. It's always been a dream of mine, and what I love about overnight camp, and I think it's particularly relevant to this topic, is when I was a kid in school everything was against the current for me. Academics were not always the easiest. Sitting and behaving myself was not always the easiest. And then I went to overnight camp, and all of a sudden the environment was more conducive for me. And I felt like I could swim with the current. Things were downhill. And I wanted to dedicate my professional life to providing other opportunities for kids to be in an environment that felt like they could be their best selves. So I'm excited to be able to share a little bit of my experience professionally. And I'm just really so impressed and blown away with the community that you've built here in Shrewsbury. So thank you for having me.
Okay, so we are going to talk about 3 topics, and we have 10 to 15 minutes per topic for both of you to answer collectively. So I will begin with the first topic. We are living in a time that seems like everyone has strong opinions about every single topic, whether it's a favorite sports team, to a favorite musician, to whether you are a vegan, vegetarian, or gluten-free. We know that strong opinions can sometimes divide among family, friends, neighbors, and community members. On a more serious note, we've seen world events and local and national politics cause such divide. As this is happening amongst adults, we might imagine how our young people are also experiencing current events among themselves and amongst their peers. How can we develop strategies for our students and adolescents to have hard conversations about differing worldviews, current events, religion, political, diverse backgrounds, taking action, and standing on beliefs in diverse ways? Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
We're all happy with that.
Oh, okay. So I think when we're kind of talking about strategies on how to have the conversation, I think there's a step before you even have the conversation that people should have where they figure out their own values and their own morals and what their goal is in having a conversation with somebody that might tend to be a little bit difficult or be a hard conversation. And by that, I think it's important because if you figure out your own values and your own morals and what you really are expecting in this conversation, then I think it really helps the flow and the way that the conversation ends up ebbing. So I think before you even start having these types of conversations, like one strategy that I would take and encourage our students to have is to just kind of figure out who they are themselves and, try to see what their goals are and then have the conversation and hopefully have it align with what they decided were their morals and values.
I love that. I was thinking a little bit about the name of this group that has brought us here together, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I have seen DEI a lot. The B, the belonging part, I think is really, really important and not to be taken for granted. I think whenever we get an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations and get to know somebody with a different perspective, to me, I maybe one of my personal values is belonging. It should be a conversation. It should be a partnership. It should be something that brings us together. If we wanted to have a conversation that would divide us apart, then we would know that from the beginning, and then it's a different goal. So I think for me, remembering that the belonging, the connection is part of the goal, if not the primary goal. And every once in a while, it's important to gut check that and say, hey, is this conversation bringing us together? And if not, okay, let's reset that. To me, that's really important. I think the other thing that I wrote down a lot, but I guess the thing that I really want to emphasize, and we do this in camp all the time, we start with the concept of role modeling. I remember when I was presented sushi for the first time, I was super, super intimidated. It was way over my head. I was like, I am not comfortable eating that. And there was an entry point to me. There was cucumber avocado roll. Great. Okay, I can start with that, right? And I can build up my stamina. I can build up my capacity. I can work those muscles. Hard conversations and the real meat of these is not easy to do. And you have to develop the muscles to have those conversations in a real way. And I think we can role model that for our kids. I was particularly thinking about this question in my own kids who are 9 and 11. What can I do as a parent to role model how to have these kinds of conversations? So here's a few things that I thought of. One, I think it's important to share with our kids complex issues and bring them up regularly, and take the time to offer not just what the challenging issue is, but what the different perspectives might be. So I don't mean to make light of this, but as an example, I wrote down Bill Belichick versus Tom Brady. There are very different perspectives on that, right? Some people think Tom Brady is the one who deserves all the credit for 6 championships. Some people feel Bill Belichick is. But if you are a Belichick person or a Brady person, there is a lot of opportunity to provide a different perspective or the other perspective. I think about how we present all the nuance. If we present to our kids as having things be very simplistic, straightforward, and in absolutes, they will then have conversations in absolutes, in simplicity, and without nuance. So I think that that's really important to role model that. Another example of that might be to help our kids practice this kind of stuff, to let them be the experts. This is a trick that we use at camp all the time. We want our kids to be the experts. They're often in schools where teachers are typically the holder of the cards, and they're the leading experts in content, and kids are there to absorb all of that. And at camp, we want to flip that on the side and let kids be the experts and us follow along. And what I do with my kids sometimes is I'll present them a challenge that I'm dealing with at work. I presented this solution to a problem at work, and I really think this is right. What do you guys think I'm missing? What should I be considering? Who else should I be talking to? I try to ask them those questions, and I try to seek their advice and let them practice that stuff. And it's a helpful reminder for me that I should be doing that myself too. So I think that when we have these conversations, knowing our own values, making sure that we focus on the belonging, but also role modeling it for our kids so that they can see how to practice this stuff, because they only know from what they experience.
Yeah. I think that was all like amazing points. I think especially what you were talking about with nuances is super important, because with a lot of issues, they don't tend to be as black and white as most people make them out to be. And so providing the nuances and providing, that it might be a little bit more complex than people make it out to be, I think is super important. And with those nuances, I think with difficult conversations, it's also incredibly important for you guys to be able to find common ground. Because, with discussions like that, if you guys are polar opposites and you feel like you disagree on every level, I can guarantee you that there is at least some baseline that you guys do agree on. And I think it's a great way to start from there and then kind of work your way out. Because already, if you can figure out that you guys have common ground, you already feel a little bit more like allies, and it makes the conversation a little bit easier to have, even if your views are very varying. So I think providing the nuances and being able to explain yourself while also being able to find common ground is super, super important. And the only way that I personally think you can find common ground is by listening, right? So when you're having a conversation, I think it's really easy for you to want to get out everything, right? Say everything that you believe, all your points. But if you were to imagine yourself having a conversation with yourself, like it's not productive, nobody's really learning anything. So if you kind of take that step back and take some time to really listen to the other person, you were able to find common ground that way. You were able to listen to their nuances, and you can kind of see like where you guys lie on that disagreement, So I think that's super, super important about the nuances. I really agree with that. One other thing that I was thinking about with these difficult conversations, if you're a parent having these conversations with your children, as a parent, you probably have your own beliefs, right, and your own values. And you want to make sure while you're teaching your child those values, that you allow them to also be an independent thinker. So I really liked what you were saying, you let them kind of help figure out your problems and then see, your work problems and see if they come to the same conclusion. I really like that because I think, at the end of the day, we're all independent thinkers. And while as a parent, you really do want to, have your child have the same morals and values as you, it might not end up that way. And you need to figure out a way to make it still work, And I think the best way to do that as a parent is to have empathy and to teach your child empathy. Because then that way, if you and your child can have a disagreement and still feel empathetic and still understand each other, your child is already on a great path to have difficult conversations with their peers and still feel like, they can empathize with them, they can still be friends with them. So yeah, I think empathy is a really big part of these types of conversations. And when you were talking about belonging, you feel that through empathy.
Yeah, and I think the role modeling piece of that is like it's so humbling to think about like what we're hoping our kids take from us and grow up to be. They're watching us as parents, and that is terrifying. One of the things that I wrote down, I think storytelling is also really, really powerful. I do a lot of work with international, our staff. We have a very diverse staff at the summer camp that I run. We have about 240 staff members. We have last year we had 18 different countries represented. So I have the real pleasure of getting a chance to meet really wonderful people from all over the world. And one of the things that I've learned about is how much our cultures are defined by the children's books that we read and have been read to us, and what those messages are and what we value. And I think the storytelling is really, really important. I think about the movies that I watched as a kid, and I wouldn't say like I was influenced because I watched Dumb and Dumber, but my SAT scores reflected that. But thinking about my kids who now, watched Inside Out, and thinking about how their own emotions and how they can be in touch with their emotions, that's influencing them in a very different way. And the stories that we tell have a real impact. So when we think about setting our kids up for success to be able to navigate a diverse world and communicate with people who have different perspectives, different beliefs, different viewpoints, we have to storytell that. So one of the things that we try to do is weave in our family and at camp stories of individuals gaining a different perspective, trying something that they had never tried before, having a conversation with someone or even saying something like this is a question that we ask our counselors to reflect on and share with their kids. A time when you had a viewpoint or a perspective change, right? What does that mean? When was there something that you believed X, Y, and Z, and then later on in your life you said, you know what? Maybe I have a little bit of a different stance there, because I'm sure we're all familiar with the concept of growth mindset, but a big part of being able to navigate and have conversations with different people with different perspectives is being open to saying, maybe I don't know everything.
Yeah. And actually, that's so funny because I have something almost exactly the same written over here. And I think we can probably use this as the last point before we wrap up to the next question. But I think it's super important for us as individuals to realize and to make our children understand that it is okay to change your stance. And I think that comes with when you have these types of conversations, what is your goal? And if you have a conversation with somebody, and if your goal is just to gain a greater perspective, then you already have made it so much easier for yourself to be okay to change your mind. And I think with a lot of people, they're scared to do that because, they feel like it makes them cowardly or it affects their character. But if anything, I personally think that is one of the hardest things that you can do. If you have so publicly advertised and shown your belief in one stance, and then, we're able to take that step back and listen to other perspectives and then realize, actually, like, maybe they have a point. Being able to swap and change your stance, I think, is actually a really great point and great telling of your character. And I think it's a really difficult thing to do because, it kind of goes against everything that you've learned or everything that you've believed. But at the end of the day, I think it's super important when you're having these difficult conversations to realize that, maybe I should take a step back, maybe I should reevaluate myself. And that just goes back to the very first thing I said, setting your goals and making sure you're in the right headspace to have these types of conversations. And it really is also a reflection of your maturity,
Well, why don't we almost shift gears? Why don't we build a little bit more about how that's relevant to the next topic, which is how can students support friends of opposing views? How can they remain friends? When should they tap out conversation when it feels uncomfortable?
I think that this is a great question, and like the way I started the last question, I'm going to do something kind of similar, but I think before you even go into it, you should understand your audience. You know, in the previous question, I said the first thing you should do is understand your goals, but I think in this type of situation, the next thing you should do is understand their goals. Because if you guys are not on the same level, not on the same page, emotionally, or even just like knowledge, if you don't have the same level of knowledge about the topic, I think that's when you can kind of realize like, oh, I should tap out of this conversation, or, you know, this is a meaningful, productive conversation to engage in. So yeah, first thing I would say is making sure you understand your audience. And if you do end up having opposing views, what is the cause of, you know, the disagreement? Is it something factual that is the disagreement? Because then that's something that can get cleared up really easily. And then I totally think you could stay friends. Is it something that relates to your values? In that case, I think it ends up being a little bit more tricky because, you know, your values are something that you hold important to you. And if you and the person that you are debating with end up having different values fundamentally, that can make it really difficult. And it probably makes you clash on a lot of topics. And you can kind of just gauge the situation and see, is it productive for me to keep pushing and keep talking to them about this topic, even though it's clear in their mind, like they're being stubborn, they're not going to change their stance. You know, there's no harm in taking that step back and being like, you know, I don't think that this is a good friendship for me to maintain, for my like sake and for their sake. So in that sense, I would say, you know, it's okay to take the step back. But if it's something where you feel like you have pretty similar morals, similar values, and, you know, the issues are very superficial, the disagreements are very surface level, I totally think that if you guys are on the same maturity level, you were able to have that conversation and work things out and still maintain friends. And even if you do still end up ultimately disagreeing, you can still maintain that friendship, I think. Because even in, you know, my life, my personal life, I feel like I have lots of friendships with people that I feel like don't necessarily I agree with fully, but that's okay. Like, that's part of being human, you know, that's how we make connections with people. But that's kind of how I would gauge this question in the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's such an important question, and I think validating and normalizing that relationships change over time, like that happens. That's a real thing. You know, there are some people who, you know, are in your lives for the entirety of your life, and that's awesome. And those relationships change over time. So I think I think sometimes for our teens, they might feel a sense of shame. Why is this relationship I've been friends with this kid for, you know, since second grade, and now all of a sudden we don't get along anymore? Like, what did I do wrong? And there's a guilt that can sometimes come with that. There's a disappointment, a frustration, did I do something wrong? I think normalizing that is really important. It's okay to grow apart sometimes. It's okay as you are developing your own sense of self to sometimes have different perspectives. That happens. That's okay. I would really want to distinguish, this is something that we do at camp all the time, and when the trainer who shared this with me taught it to me, I was like, where has this language been my whole life? There is a very big difference between being uncomfortable and being unsafe. When we are uncomfortable, it's not fun, but discomfort is the tool, it's the mechanism for growth.
It's necessary.
It's necessary,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's what happens if you think about, like, you're working out, right? Like, I don't know about it. I don't like working out, right? It is painful, but that's how I know it's doing its job, right? Growth is like that. Discomfort is necessary for growth. But being unsafe is really not acceptable. So that's one of the things that we share with our teens and with our staff, and I think that's a really important distinction. Are you feeling uncomfortable right now? Okay, let's talk about it. Is this a relationship that we want to maintain? Are you still getting something out of this? It's really important, I think, for me, I need a reminder, and I think for our teens too, to remember that variety is important. Well-balanced dishes have different elements of different things. If you are only with like-minded people, it's a different experience. Yep. Having being friends and connecting and engaging with people with different perspectives helps you grow. That's really important. But being unsafe is a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And that's if there's ever a moment where we're unsafe, that's an immediate pause to say, should we tap out right now? And it's okay to say, I'm not feeling safe in this moment. In this conversation, I'm not feeling safe. and then we need to recalibrate that. So I think that that's a really important distinction, being uncomfortable and being safe. The other part of the question that I really loved was, when is it appropriate? I also want to throw out, how is it appropriate? I work with a lot of college age young adults, and one of the things that I see is there is a very big gap between college age young adults who can navigate a difficult conversation and those who can't. And oftentimes the difference is not knowing when to tap out, but then how to tap out. So you're having a disagreement with your roommate. Some of them will say, hey, listen, I'm really not comfortable with how this is going. I want to talk this through. Whether we're going to be roommates next semester or not, let's figure this out and make the most out of the next period of time. And others will just quit. We'll just walk out, ghost, done. I can't deal with this. I can't navigate it. I think our job as educators, parents, is to help our kids, again, in the sushi analogy, like the bite-sized ones, the early process, learning how to have these difficult conversations so that when things happen in adulthood, they're more equipped to be able to navigate it.
Yeah, I one thing I really liked about what you said is, I feel like it's also kind of reflecting the emotional maturity. If you're not on that same level, then it might be really difficult to have that conversation. And by the time somebody does tap out of a conversation, if it's really difficult, I think it's really important to send this message to our teens that, they should still be tolerant. Even if you disagree, that does not give you the right to start to be rude and then make it so that it can be an unsafe situation. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, delicate balance, but I think it's a skill that a lot of people need to learn, because regardless of whether or not you guys agree or are on the same maturity level, have the same goals or anything I was saying, at the end of the day, if you cannot be tolerant to somebody that has different values than you, that is an issue. So I think that is something that is really important to teach our children. With the STOP program, I was able to witness, the progression throughout the weeks of how the students interacted with each other. And what you were saying is super important about having a diverse group. And a lot of these students had never been to a Sikh Gurdwara before, or had never been to a Jewish temple before. So it was so awesome to kind of see them, get this inclusive education. And it can really help with these types of conversations, because even if you guys disagree, ultimately, you're able to find that common ground, and you're able to see, even when we disagree, we should still be tolerant of each other, and I think that's super important.
I want to offer a tip to parents who might be interested in this. I think I remember when I was a kid, my parents, I did not have the appreciation that everything that my parents did came from a place of love, care, and concern. I did not have that perspective, and I now see, as a parent myself and as an educator, I talk to a lot of parents on the phone who will call me and say, I can see that my kid is struggling with this. And I ask them about it, and they won't tell me anything. I was like, let me guess, are you the parent? Yeah, I'm like, that's why they're not telling you anything. They don't want to talk to us necessarily about that. And here's the trick that I think sometimes helps, is to say something like if you have a child who has maybe one of these relationships, and you hear for months and months and months they're talking about their best friend Ridha, and oh my God, she's the best, I love her, and then all of a sudden you don't hear about her name anymore, right? And so as a parent, oh, something's up, right? And then you say, hey, what happened? I'm not gonna tell you, right? Here's a trick. You say, I noticed you haven't brought up her name in a little while. I wonder who's your best friend? Norasha. I wonder what Norasha thinks about that. Right? Just giving that buffer, and again, taking you from being the expert who might be imposing the best way to handle that as an adult to saying hey, as a peer, what does your friends think about that? And just acknowledging that you notice it, but you have to get them talking about it. I've noticed more and more a trend of when it gets difficult, not for everybody, but for some young adults, when it gets difficult, when it gets complicated, when it gets uncomfortable, we just drop it and move. And I think that our job is to help them say, whether that's the best case for this individual relationship or not, at some point you're going to want to have relationships that you're going to want to fight through the uncomfortable moments, and we got to teach them how to do that.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, so to shift gears, our last topic. How can school leadership, staff, trusted adults foster a safe and supportive environment during local and world events, presidential, government policy changes, etc.? Should there be ongoing programs established in our schools that could be beneficial? If so, how would that look?
You want to go first?
Sure. Yes, there should be programming. Yes, there should be support. This is actually really, really important, I think. And I think it's such a timely question because there is diversity, there is difference of opinions, there is difference of values and beliefs all the time. Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert, we're about to go into an election, right? So now is a good time where you want to set that. These things rarely work in a reactive way. They rarely work well when you sort of already have a big moment of tension where things flare up and people are angry or frustrated or upset. And then you say, oh, okay, now let's get together and everybody get on the same page. You have to do that early on. So I think educators, what you're doing in the community right now, I think is a great start. So that's the first thing. I think early, and it's almost like, I can't go to my kids after they have left stuff all over the house and then say, okay, now everybody needs chores. Like, we need to do that before. If it feels reactive, it won't be as successful. So that's one. Two, I think the sense of belonging is huge. I think kids won't have productive conversations about uncomfortable topics if they aren't feeling safe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in their emotional safety. And a big part of being emotionally safe for all of us is a sense of belonging. So I recommend, and we do this at our camp all the time, we do social mapping. We look at every single member of our community and we say, who is this person connected to? Who are their advocates? What are their groupings? And if we can identify 3 or 4 or 5 people who don't have that sense of belonging, don't have that sense of connection, we're going to triage that. We're going to address that. We're going to help make sure everybody has that anchor so that when things do get tough, they have people to lean on. So I would start with those two.
Yeah. I don't mean to plug my program again, but I think it
You should
really
plug it.
is.
It's good.
I really think that it is the perfect response to a question like this, because the purpose of STOP within itself is to encourage students to have more diverse outlook on life, have more diverse friends, make sure that they feel safe, even in situations that are new to them. And I think those are honestly lifelong skills that they take with them, being able to introduce themselves as somebody they don't know and they don't think they have anything in common with, but being able to realize, oh, actually, like, we both love pizza, we both are from this town, and just small things that eventually make you feel like you belong. And with that, I think having your children have diverse friendships is only as important as you yourself having diverse friendships, because at the end of the day, children are mirrors, and they will, if they learn something at school, if they learn something at a program like STOP, once they come home, if they're not kind of seeing that same attitude being reflected, then they're not going to see why they should stick to it and keep that with them. So I think that as a parent, you have this responsibility to make sure that, what you were saying, like, you maintain good friendships and you are a very diverse individual, and then your child will also want to encourage, reflect that behavior. Another thing is, if a student does come to a faculty member or a child comes to their parent, I think it's really important for that child to feel like they are safe in that environment. So as a parent or as a teacher, as a staff member, you might have your own values, and the student might come up to you with the situation that happened, and you want to be able to separate what you personally believe, so that you can at least empathize with that child for a moment so that they feel safe. And then later on, you guys can kind of get into the depth and see really what is the core issue. But by being able to provide that safe space and making sure that they feel like they belong, and making sure that you show them that you care for them, I think is a really important step for adults and staff to create that supportive and safe environment for students during times that can be a little bit difficult. So that's one thing I would say. And in addition to programs, I think it's also really helpful to have mental health workshops, mental health focused discussions in school, at home, with difficult conversations and, war times, election. People have a lot of anxiety, and it makes sense, why they would feel that way. And you want to make sure that they don't feel alone and that they can feel comfortable having a discussion. And so I would say, in addition to programs like STOP, and in addition to parents mirroring an environment at home that they want their child to be in, you should also encourage discussions about mental health, encourage them to talk about what's going on. And there are different techniques in doing that, like you were saying, bring up a peer and, separate yourself as the parent so that they feel more comfortable speaking about it. But I think at the end of the day, all those points are super important to having productive conversations.
I wanted to share two more things because I think that this is so important, actually, and now I'm thinking about my own work, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm saying that this is something that you might want to consider. I'm I have not considered this enough. My team, we talk about this all the time. Hope is not a plan, and I am someone who is very idealistic. I love talking about the big picture. I have big aspirations. Great, wonderful. I live in the abstract, and my team always says to me, "Great, what's our plan?" We want to have an environment. We want to have a community. We want to have a school that is embracing of diversity, and we'll claim that. What's our plan to execute that? And if we can't articulate really what that plan is, we don't have a plan. And again, the election is coming, but this already exists in our community, and the election is going to magnify the intensity of that, I would imagine. And so I think now is the time to say, okay, I'm sure in some document, I'm sure in some mission statement we have that we celebrate and embrace diversity and that we're inclusive or that we are supportive or that we are kind or whatever it is. What's our plan to make that happen? I would push for that. The other thing that I want to say is I have actually one of my camp counselors who is an educator. He does a lot of work in this field, and one of the things that he always likes to establish in any conversation, and I think it's true for institutions when they're thinking about the goals that they have in diverse conversations and embracing some of these challenging conversations, is he always likes to separate when we're talking about what we know, what we think, what we feel, and what we do. And those are very, very different things. You can study something like, really tense topics from a knowledge base that is historical or, reportive, which is different than how you might feel about that topic or what you might believe in that topic or what you might want to do because of that knowledge. Those are very different things. So I think from an academic perspective, a school might say, when we're thinking about diversity, are we trying to get people to feel something?
Yeah.
Or do we want them to know a different perspective? Those are very, very different scopes. And I think being clear about that with the students is really, really important.
And we have another 2 minutes. Did you have anything else?
I think we can probably open up to questions, yeah.
Okay. We will now open up the floor for questions and answers from our panelists. Huh? Okay, and please give the cards to the DEIB committee.
And let me talk. So just as a reminder, we're taking questions just in written format only. So if you have an index card or if you don't, anyone can raise your hand. So you can write down your questions on an index
I hope I didn't interrupt too much.
Oh.
You did great.
Any other questions on the floor?
This one.
Okay.
That's right. Maybe you can start with the first one?
Okay.
Yeah, you can go ahead and start.
You ready?
Sure.
Ready for the questions. Here we go. Do you have any tips or tricks to ask a shy student open up their views with family and friends, and more for college students?
What was the last part of the question?
About their views with family and friends, and more for college students.
With shy students in particular, in STOP, we had some shy middle schoolers, and obviously it's a different environment than being with your family and friends, because you obviously are more comfortable with that than a group of strangers. But what I found really worked with our more shy students were to have the high schoolers take initiative. So the high schoolers were always the one to start the conversation, and they always started out with very easy topics of conversation just to get them talking, asking what they did over the weekend, you know, what they had for dinner before coming, if they have any plans after the program. And just by getting them to start talking and really form a conversation, you can kind of ease into the more difficult questions, kind of get them to see what they're thinking. But I think a great way is to just get them started talking about anything, and then see, you know, how easy it is for you to change gears of the conversation and get it to be a little bit more difficult.
There are a few like prompts that I like to use. I don't know that they're prompts. That's not right there. But like I think it can be intimidating, I think, sometimes to ask people to share verbally, or to ask them like a kind of like a I don't want to make assumptions, but it feels like you could ask the two of us, like, what was your deepest, darkest secret in second grade? And we would be like, yeah, let me. But I think that's intimidating for a lot of people, to go like just so deep so quick. So a few things that I like to do. There's a visual that I have in my office that I really love, that is two people standing opposite one another. And in the middle, there is, depending on where you're standing, either a number 6 or a number 9. I don't know if anybody's seen that visual, and I wish I had it, but it's really kind of cool because they're both correct. But it really depends on your perspective. So I'll share that image with someone. I'll say, what is that like? Tell me, you think this is cool? I think it's cool. I want to show it with you. Or another example is there's a Dutch TV company that made this. I don't know if you've seen this video. It's really cool. I'll send it to you. But they made this promotional video. They got all these people into a room, and they were sort of like most stereotypical looking people. There were people in formal wear who were sort of businessy people. There were very, I don't know how I would describe, lots of tattoos, creative hairstyles, those folk, right? And there were different groups. And then they asked these questions, and they realized that through these questions, we were making a lot of assumptions about people's backgrounds, like who was the class clown? And you saw this person in a very nice business suit, you know, I was the class clown, like those kinds of things. And I'll show that video and I'll say, hey, what does that make you think of? How does that relate to like what we're struggling with right now? And like those kinds of things I think are a little bit more accessible than our own feelings sometimes.
Okay. Anything else before I go on to the next question? No? Okay, ready for the next question?
Yep.
Here we go. At what point do educators, facilitators step into a conversation about current events? How do they know boundaries?
Between like a conversation. I'm assuming this means like if two students are having a conversation when an adult should step in.
Yes.
I think, yeah, it's a very fine line of when somebody should probably step in, because I think to a certain extent you should let them hash it out, you know, see where they can get. But I think what Efraim said earlier, if it seems like it's getting to a point where it's, you know, unsafe, harmful, the conversation's not productive anymore, it just seems like, you know, they're going in circles, I think that's a pretty good point to, you know, step in. And you could probably even step in earlier than that, before, you know, they start throwing insults at each other. Like, if you realize, you know, they're not really getting anywhere with this, tell them, you know, interfere, just say, you know, maybe you guys should, you know, spend some time separated a little bit, reflect on what you guys talked about, and then see if there's any other talking points that you really wanted to get through to the other person, and then maybe you can reconvene at that point. But yeah, once you realize it's just a circular conversation and it's not really going anywhere, I would say it's a pretty safe space to interfere.
Yeah, I think that the unsafe versus uncomfortable is really important, and like a little bit of like, you know, hey, this is a really important conversation. It seems like you're really, really into this. Like, these are hard conversations. This feels like something that I would love to be able to help you make sure you have a productive conversation with. Can I help you? Are you okay if I just like sit down and help you out around the edges? Because sometimes a kid who is either part of that conversation or someone who's on the periphery might want to engage but feel really uncomfortable without that just little extra bumper.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a the topic is change of youth. Do you think that comes with knowledge, age, change in environment, and or experience? Who would like to answer that?
I think all of the above. I think, the moment somebody kind of goes from like a youth to somebody who can kind of have these independent thoughts on their own is the reflection of all those things. You combine growing older with their new experiences, with location changes, and there was one other, knowledge changes. You learn more about your environment and the world around you. Like even me, like I still feel like a child, like I feel like a little baby, but like to some people, if I were to say that to like a 12-year-old, they'd be like, no, like you're so old, But like to me, I'm still a baby, I'm still growing. There's still so much knowledge for me to learn and so many experiences for me to still have. So even somebody 80 years old, 90 years old, you are still youthful in the sense that there's still more things for you to learn out there. So personally, I say we stay young forever because we're always learning, but that's probably my take on it.
I'd like to add in relationships. Like for me, at least personally, like all the new perspectives that I can think about in my life and all the ways that I've grown have all been because people have opened up my eyes. And I'd like to think that I'm a super open-minded person, but I can tell you like the best insights that I've gotten, the best perspective that I've gotten has been because I've met awesome people who've opened my eyes.
Did somebody introduce you to sushi?
Yeah.
Because I think for me that would really eye-opening.
I was like pretty much just a cheese pizza kind of guy my whole life, and then all of a sudden,
it's probably the best thing they taught you then.
Oh my God! Now it's much more expensive for me to go out to dinner now. So.
Okay, so this question is just for Ridha.
Okay.
What did you learn from Stop that was a surprise and unexpected?
I think for me, the biggest surprise was actually how open the students were, because it was the first year that we were doing this program. So I really did expect students to be a lot more reserved than they actually were. And I think the turning point, the very first meeting we had was at the Shrewsbury Library. I wanted it to be a comfortable space for students because it was a new program, but the library is something familiar. And then the next meeting we had was at the Gurudwara in Westboro. And that was like a complete 180 flip for a lot of the students because I think only one of them had actually been to the Gurudwara before. And for everybody else, it was like a brand new experience, including myself. And it was just so different but so lovely. And I think it really opened up the students' minds to put themselves in more uncomfortable situations that they've never been in before. So I think the biggest thing that surprised me was truly their openness, because I thought going from someplace like the Shrewsbury Library to a Sikh Gurudwara would be like too daunting for a lot of students. But in actuality, I feel like it really did work in my favor because they were all like, what's the next place we're going to? So it was good. I think that was the biggest surprise for me.
What is that? Gurudwara?
Gurudwara is like a temple for Sikh people.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's just in Westboro. Like, I feel like I drive by it all the time, but, you never put yourself out there, and you learn so much. I learned so much myself being there, so it was great.
Okay, this is for both of you. After the 2016 election, a group of mothers co-founded the Shrewsbury Diversity Coalition. How can this group on Facebook help the community?
Oy. The Facebook part is throws a curveball.
For me, I think I know that there is, I forget what the name of the group is called on Facebook, but there is also another group for like Shrewsbury diverse community. Yes, A Better Shrewsbury. And A Better Shrewsbury, I was introduced through one of the parents from the STOP program, and I think what they're doing is really great. And I think probably that's something similar that this group can also do. With A Better Shrewsbury, it's like a monitored Facebook group, and within the Facebook group, they kind of have people that are similar-minded and open people, willing to try new experiences, and they kind of advertise in like the diverse aspects of Shrewsbury. They have also a YouTube like show through Shrewsbury Media Connections, and it's super awesome because they show you all these different cool things locally within Shrewsbury. But I think, yeah, maybe kind of, reflecting those kind of things and having similar-minded, open-minded people join the Facebook group and provide different experiences within Shrewsbury. I know if I was on it, I would advertise Stop Again. But yeah, I think probably going about it that way, teaching people about different things we have within our town itself, because Shrewsbury is a pretty diverse town in my opinion. So even just advertising the stuff that we have within this area.
My friend and colleague who gave me the know, think, feel, do, he also has a rule that he doesn't have any difficult conversations that he can't see the other person's face. I think that's, when possible, good. And I would encourage this group to try to have as many of these kinds of forums as possible. It's so easy for us to not have empathy and not have understanding and lose the discipline of respectful dialogue when we can't see the other person. So I would just push for that.
Okay, and I guess this is our last question. Is that it? Okay. For both of you, how would you respond to someone who promotes conspiracy and other untruths?
So I wonder, in what sense they meant in this question. Like, is it an in-person thing, or is it someone like a little troll on Instagram or something, like spreading false information? Yeah. In that situation, I would say take whatever they say with a grain of salt. In the world that we live in today, it's so easy to fact check. It's so easy to just take that extra minute to Google search and check other sources to see if what you're being told is actually true. It's so easy, for propaganda to spread, and it's so easy to stop the spread of propaganda just by searching it up and double checking. So I would say always taking that step back to reflect and be like, is what I'm reading actually true? And what emotion are they trying to invoke in me? Because a lot of the times when people are trolling, spreading conspiracy theories, it's because they have an agenda. So you want to kind of take that step back to see, what am I really being told here, and what's the goal of this, and kind of working yourself backwards, I think. But it takes a mature individual to do that,
Thank you.
I think it's such a good question. It's such a practical, real life question because it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And I think especially things that we're particularly passionate about and really care, we really care. There's a training that we do for our staff. For a lot of our staff, they don't have a ton of experience working with kids. So we train them for that. And one of the trainings that we do is this metaphor of picking up a rope. And I think it's applicable in this scenario. The concept is sometimes kids will sort of metaphorically poke us. And they want us to engage, and they'll do something to get us under our skin, and then we pick up that rope, and then we're caught, and now we're playing tug of war, right? And I think sometimes with individuals, I don't want to make total assumptions, but sometimes when people are trying to spread propaganda or this kind of thing, they really want to get into the debate. They really want to get into the fight. They really want the attention, the oxygen to the fire, and they really want that. And I think that's one of those. I love your suggestion. I'm not going to pick up that rope. I'm not going to get into the tug of war here. I'm going to go home. I'm going to research that, and I'm going to see
it's
if
a
that
form
resonates
of
with me.
disengagement.
Yeah.
Please thank our panelists, Ridha Alam and Efraim Yudewitz, for speaking this evening.
Thank you.
And we also would like to thank Priya Rantham and Michael Zeller and the Shrewsbury Public Library staff and Shrewsbury Media Connection and all the guests for coming to the event. Thank you very much.